Hello everyone, this is Sunny from Sons English. Today we'll be looking at analysis writing. So, what is an analysis? Analyses are part of body paragraphs, and so you don't write analyses in the introduction nor in the conclusion. In each analysis, you must include the following components, which are quote, technique, effect, and idea. Note that in each analysis, so in one analysis that you write, you should have the following components. So in each body paragraph, we have around 3 to 4 analyses, and therefore you need to have 3 to 4 sets of the 4 components I have on the screen. If you have like one quote or like one technique in each body paragraph that you're writing at the moment, note that there is a little bit of an issue there. The biggest mistake or issue that I see with analysis writing is that students have the tendency to be too descriptive or explanatory, meaning that students have the tendency to describe what the quote is about by focusing on the who, what, when, and where. But when we are writing analyses, we need to focus on the why, how, and so what. In other words, how are more abstract concepts like power, mortality, and identity explored through the construction of a text. Let's have a look at a sample together. This is the first one. I won't tell you my thoughts on this analysis just yet. I want you to have a go at making your own evaluation on whether you think this is a good or not so good analysis. The first idea evident in the novella is colonialism. The description of an African fireman to have been edifying as seeing a dog walking on his hind legs shows that the Africans were being treated poorly and being exploited because that was the main target of the Europeans. Let's move on to sample 2. Conrad exposes the erasure of agency within the Congolese natives in his derogatory description of the African fireman who was as edifying as seeing a dog walking on his hind legs. The animalistic simile likens the fireman to a trained dog, emphasizing the normalized submission of Africans to European colonial powers that justify the exploitation of the savages under promises of civilization. I think it might be obvious that sample 2 is the better analysis, but let's have a go at looking at them one by one. Starting with sample 1, let's look at the first sentence. The first idea evident in the novella is colonialism. So, this sentence is a very random and vague introductory sort of sentence that precedes the main part of the analysis. So, it's just kind of there. And at the same time, this idea should have already been explored in the topic sentence. So, it might just sound like a little bit of a repeat. So, if we move on to the main part of the analysis here, this section is also really vague in that, firstly, there's no explicit technique being presented. Yes, it does mention description, but it's not strong enough. And further, if we move on, the part about the Africans being treated poorly, what does that even mean? So, what does being treated poorly look like more specifically? And what is the main target of these Europeans? And though mentioning colonialism in the first part of this analysis does imply that you're referring to the European colonialists, it would be better if you narrow down on what specifically was the main target of these European colonialists on the African space. Such detail would be able to make your analysis sound a lot more sophisticated and a lot more nuanced. Moving on, let's have a look at the second sample. Starting off with the first sentence. Conrad exposes the erasure of agency within the Congolese natives in his derogatory description of the African fireman who was as edifying as seeing a dog walking on his hind legs. Already, it's a lot more specific than the first in narrowing down the description to be derogatory. And also, if you recall in the first sample, it was just throwing in the idea that they were being exploited and that they were being treated poorly. But here, we have the specific way in which they are being treated poorly. Note that the technique and quotes that you present must always work together in proving your idea. So, in other words, you can't just find a random quote and technique hoping that it will somehow justify the idea that you want to present. So in this case, I want you to recognize the link between the animalistic simile in the quote that is justifying the dehumanization of the savages, and i.e., how such dehumanization becoming so normalized is validating the erasure of agency within the Congolese natives. I also want you to note that just by looking at this one analysis here, we are able to find out 3 things. Number 1, erasure of agency of the Congolese natives. Number 2, normalized submission of savages to European colonial powers. And number 3, how European colonial powers sought to justify exploitation of savages on the promises of civilization. So even if the marker is not familiar with the text, they are able to easily follow your point on how the author is capturing the realities of colonialism. But if we go back to the first sample, the only thing that we can actually find out from this analysis is that the Africans have been treated poorly under the main target of the Europeans. And even so, the claim wasn't even justified properly. Now, as a recap, remember that each analysis should include a quote, technique, effect, and idea. And number two, remember to always narrow down your ideas. So, vague statements such as an idea of colonialism or key ideas of prejudice will not be enough. And also, number three, ensure that your techniques and quotes work together to justify the idea that you're presenting. So, that is it for today's video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys again soon.